Hello all and welcome to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. Tonight we are tackling the North Lome Labyrinth, as well as we're gonna also release Naydra from the, shall we say, imprisonment of Malice. Now the North Lome Labyrinth itself is supposed to be a pretty easy section, shall we say. Find your way through, find a pathway or whatnot. Bada bing, bada boom, you're done, right? That's all there is to it. But the Lome Labyrinth has often been one of those mysteries that never really made sense to me. See, most of the, shall we say, Zonai ruins fall under one of, let's say, 7 different types, ranging from small areas of intrigue, like the Thundara Plateau, giant carvings. You have the Typhlo ruins that are perpetually in the dark. And yet, on any map, you're going to see the 3 labyrinths. And for myself specifically, I took one look at this and said, what in the world is going on there? This is something that had always intrigued me from pretty much day one. And I'd like to say that this is just what it is. That it's just a simple whatever. It's just a simple maze. But there had to be a lot more to it than what we see. Now, if you're going to take it and just say, okay, well, it's a maze created around a space because the Zonai wanted it that way, sure. We know of, what is it, 6 by the time of Tears of the Kingdom? 3 in the sky, 3 on the ground, and their underground counterparts. Between these 6 labyrinths, at the time of Breath of the Wild, you only have access to the ones on the ground. And this is a bit of an important distinction to make. There are simply 3 mazes. One in the northeast, one in the northwest, and one in the southwest. And that should be it. There shouldn't be a whole lot of intrigue or storytelling tied to this. But the why cropped up. And in the case of these 3 shrines, I guess you could call it, in Breath of the Wild, it came down to just finding your way from point A to point B. You get to the end of the maze, congratulations, you get a free spirit orb. There's not much in the way of combat, and if you can get through the maze fast enough, not much in the way of puzzles either. It's about the courage to enter the maze, in this case. Very few shrines actually focus in on courage, on the ability to move despite potential fear or trepidation over the circumstances in front of you. And yet, this particular batch of shrines often tests me in ways that other shrines simply wouldn't. The fact that they are a test of what I'd consider to be a test of courage, to go into the shrine, to the unknown, and seek out or complete whatever it has to offer you. That, in and of itself, to me, is the point of this shrine. If Link, of all characters, of all beings in the Zelda universe, is unable to actually go through and find an exit to these various mazes, then he doesn't have the courage necessary to save Zelda or Hyrule in and of itself. See, I always loved this very simple saying in Twilight Princess by the hero's shade, that a blade holds no power unless the hand that holds it has courage. And I always look back at this as being relatively simple in its approach, and yet uncommonly complex for what Zelda usually brings up in its storytelling. What I like about this particular statement is that effectively Link, depending on which incarnation you're talking about, every single one of them is courageous in their own way. Every single one of them has this level of, I've got to do what I've got to do. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the acknowledgement that there is fear and moving forward in spite of it. And I think that's a really good note to take from a lot of this. And I love that every iteration has something unique about them. As I said, it's not about not being afraid. I think that every Link has a moment of genuine terror when dealing with the various circumstances that belay the hero of legend. Be it the Link from Skyward Sword having to fight against Tantalus, this ancient Leviathan, as it's actively tearing apart the ship he's standing on. Whether it's the Ocarina of Time Link fighting against Volvagia, simply because, well, what else do? You are confronted with a dragon that's going to eat people you know. You're going to fight the dragon. And I think that's a fantastic part about what Link is as a character. Because at no point does Link ever really slow down. He's always there to help, whatever that looks like. I do not like the edge of duality. Actually, that's a lie. I actually really like the edge of duality, but I can't use it in this one. And so there came to be a point where in many games I often compare characters to Link. I was playing Shadow of the Colossus the other day, and I couldn't help but think, would Wander be able to do what Link does? And the answer pretty much immediately is no. Wander doesn't have the same type of gear and capabilities that Link does. But the statement still stands. What if? And so, Link stands as this pinnacle of courage, of being willing to do what needs to be done. And I admire that character trait in this individual. Even if he is a fictional character, it is something to be admired about the character. But I mention other characters, and I often bring other characters into the discussion because in many ways, shapes, and forms, many of them, while they appear very different, end up being very similar in a lot of ways. Link could theoretically be compared to numerous characters from across gaming. Myself, I tend to compare him to Wander because Zelda's kidnapped and Wander is wanting to resurrect his significant other who was sacrificed at one point in time. And how far would Link or Wander go in order to save one who is special to them? This is a common, I suppose, talking point when it comes to video game characters, is how far would they go? What motivates them? Why do they do what they do? And how far would they go to resolve an issue around said problem? Okay, so that explains why I couldn't find a way out of here. Now, the gloom eyes are going to be a major part of today's video. Because gloom eyes or malice eyes, depending on which version you prescribe to, are incredibly hard to get rid of. And I don't mean that in the truest sense of they're just hard to move or whatnot. No, I'm saying that they're problematic. See, initially I was under the mindset that I had to defeat each and every one of the gloom eyes with a bow, an arrow of sorts. And during the Akala Tower, I ended up coming across a bunch of gloom eyes that could be defeated by other means. These means ended up being throwing a bomb at it and hoping for the best. And so, congratulations, you can destroy gloom eyes with bombs. And so it made me realize that a shrine I had once checked off as being unlikely, I did nothing against to that thing. A shrine I had written off as being impossible ended up being potentially more doable than I had initially said it would be. And so today we are going back to challenge the dragon, Naydra. Now, the reason I didn't do this initially was because I had assumed, based on the Gloom Eyes situation, that it would be next to impossible to deal damage to Naydra, just on the basis of knowing that Naydra is a flying target, and admittedly at the time I didn't know if I could drop bombs while paragliding, so that didn't exactly help anything. But the other side of the problem is that Naydra had a lot more mobility than I think a lot of creatures in Hyrule get. And so how do I want to word this? I ended up making a assumption that I would not be able to do it just on the basis of it's a flying enemy or being. Of course I can't defeat that with bombs and moved on. But I think I counted everything a tad too soon. So, we're going to be reclimbing Mount Lanayru, specifically to test whether or not it is in fact possible to complete the Naydra side quest. Now, we move to Tano Eo Shrine, which is on the, I believe it is the east end of the Lanayru mountain. We're currently heading north towards the precipice of the mountain itself. And this was a challenge that I personally thought was ill-conceived. I didn't think that it would be possible or even remotely reasonable to try and go after Naydra with simply bombs, and I somewhat stand by that statement. I know very well that Naydra is faster than me by both land and air travel. I know that Naydra is effectively a dragon. And I know that regardless of what I do, it's possible I won't be able to catch it at all. And so, I'm cautiously optimistic about the way in which I have to approach this. Now, I can't remember how many weak points it even has on it. I think there's like 6. But, assuming that there's 4 to 6 of them, I know how to defeat it. I know what I'm aiming to do. But the problem is that moving targets the size of Naydra really leaves a lot to be desired in terms of a target to aim for. And so I'm a little worried that this might drag on a little bit longer than I'm aiming for, just on the situation of I'm aiming to catch it, I know how to beat it, but beating it isn't the hard part, or catching it isn't the hard part. It's actually getting those strikes off. And I don't know which ones are going to land properly or not. And so we're going to see what happens. And this could be a little messier than I'd like for it to be. I'm okay with that. Unfortunately, it's not like I can do much about it. Now, one thing that I will actually give this circumstance as a whole. If you listen closely in the background, when there's no battle going on, there's this haunting, ominous track that plays in the background. And this track is meant to represent this corrupted god, effectively. And the wonderful part about this corrupted god situation is that Naydra is a corrupted being. It's trying to be saved. It was meant to get away from the malice, but just on the basis of how strong the pull of the various, shall we say, forces of Calamity Ganon are, it unfortunately got caught in the crossfire. And so, we end up with this situation where, it would be much easier to simply just leave things be. Don't get involved. But I don't believe that's something that Link would do. The moment that he got to the top of the mountain and witnessed the state that Naydra was in, that was that. There was no turning back for him as a character. There was no stopping and saying, hey, I can't do this. I gotta do what I can. And this is a sentiment that actually gets echoed a lot throughout The Legend of Zelda. Whenever you see characters like King Jabu Jabu or Valu, Link as a character always stops and says, how can I help? And I think that's a great attribute of this individual, of this character as a whole, is this understanding that he can help. This understanding and belief that he can make something happen. Anyways, Naydra is here. And so, you can see the state it's in. You have done well to find this spring. You who have overcome numerous trials and obtained the spirit orbs. The one you see before you is an attendant to the Spring of Wisdom. This is Naydra, the blue spirit of Lanayru. Its servant of the goddess has looked over the spirits and land for ages. However, dreaded malice unleashed by Calamity Ganon has possessed it and left it in this sorry state. Free Naydra from this malice. Show what your power can achieve. So immediately I'm seeing that ice pillar on the right hand side here, close to the head. If I can get that, I might have more of a chance of doing this than I thought. But we're going to have to see just how close I have to get to Naydra to actually make this happen. That did all of nothing. We're going to have to get a little higher. Thankfully, that's not really too hard. Okay, so that one's out of the question. This one halfway up the tail isn't too bad by the looks of it. And I got it in first shot. The question is, will it move now? Yes. Cool. So first point looks like it's dealt with. So at this point, we just follow Naydra and see what happens. I have my reservations about this, as I mentioned already. To me, this is not a fool's errand, but it is something that could be a lot easier than or harder than I initially think it should be. Future Nova, please take that out. That was kind of embarrassing. Anyways, let's climb the mountain back up. Or climb back up the mountain. So, the part about Naydra, now that I actually remember the fight a little bit more, Naydra will fly over the course of the battle across most of the Mount Lanayru peak. The first point will be the very peak of the mountain, second will be about halfway down, and third will be at the base. Now, these 3 points will each have a moment where Naydra is gonna kind of just loom overhead, but the thing is that Naydra will actually speed up over the course of the quote-unquote battle. The goal being, then, to get Naydra down. At least for this phase. We need to get Naydra close enough to the ground that we can hit one of Nydra's weak points to continue on into the battle. And the wonderful thing is that most of the battle has updrafts, which allows me to effectively stay closer to Nydra's height, so to speak. Makes trying to hit something with a bomb a lot easier. But that's kind of as far as the good news ends. Updrafts make it so that the bombs float, which means we have to be very selective about where we put these bombs in general to be able to access some of these weak points more reasonably. And, ooh, that looks like a good spot. And so, what's effectively going to happen is Naydra is going to initially dip down low enough to hit that one on its underside, and then we have to try to hit the ones above on the top of its head and the tail in some way, shape, or form without Naydra, yeah, that looks good, attacking, quote-unquote. And that can be a really hard sell. Yeah, that's not happening from here. Good news is, there's an even better spot. We just need to get close enough to get that first spot, and I think from there we'll be golden. The hard part is getting that first spot. You know, Naydra is incredibly majestic ordinarily, so this dark, dreary version of the creature itself is... Ow. Not all the way down the mountain, please. Kind of a letdown if you're going to end up in that situation. Well, if I was doing a no-hit run, I definitely failed that. Yeah, that was silly. No idea where the bomb ended up. Okay. So, new plan. Wait for the hand-foot thing to go directly overhead, get to the top, and throw the bomb as fast as possible to hit the eyeball. Oh, that one was actually pretty close. So, overall, I personally believe that Naydra is one of those not boss enemies, but higher priority beings in this universe. It makes it more difficult to turn a blind eye when you know the type of situation that Naydra is living in. And reality is that the dragons are all immortal, which means it doesn't matter how much pain, what the world throws at Naydra. Naydra is going to live through it no matter what. So the hard part is just effectively, you either cure it or you don't. Naydra is going to remain indefinitely. And so, for me at least, this particular side quest or side mission is about just providing Naydra with what I would give virtually anything. it needs medication. It needs something to get rid of the malice. But ordinarily, what would be done to get rid of it is an arrow. Oh, there we go. First try. No problems. The arrow would ordinarily get rid of some of the issue in and of itself. But in this case, it does next to nothing. Alright, so we just follow Naydra as it leeches, oh god, out the dark energy of, I guess malevolence or whatever you'd like to call it. And malice, that's the word. It leeches out that dark malice cloud and off we go to the races, right? We have 2 spots left, one on the hindquarters, or the last set of legs, and one on the head. Now, the lovely thing of... Wow, I missed that by a fair margin. The lovely thing about being in this wind tunnel now is that we can now get above Naydra at any point in time. So now it's less about getting under it at just the right angle, and more about catching it just high enough in its movement arcs to be viable to catch it and destroy a eyeball now. And that's arguably even harder. Because the bombs are going against gravity in these circumstances, it's a lot more difficult to find what works, at least based on my experience of this. Oh, yep, there we go. And we're bouncing along the crystals. Oh well. For me, it was a lot harder to find what worked because I was trying to fight against my natural instinct of the bomb's going to drop. So, this might take a little bit of time. But, be that as it may, Naydra, I think, showcases... Well, that was a lot easier than I thought. That it really does go a lot easier than you might think, depending on how things end up going. Or depending on how Naydra reacts. And so, for me, this ends up being a really good showcase of what the run actually looks like in more time-sensitive matters. Because the entire point of the run is to understand how things work and push the game to new heights, new limits. And by beating the game without using standard weaponry, what circumstances change? Well, I'd tell you this, I'd be done fighting Naydra by now. Because, lo and behold, what is it that Naydra's actually aiming for here? Naydra's aiming to be freed from this... Naydra effectively wants to be free of this toxin, this... well, shall I call it an all-encompassing pain? That's kind of the point. Naydra has always been a being of its own design. It's always had its own drive to some extent. And I think this is an opportunity to talk about the dragons, so to speak, as we see them in later parts of the franchise. In Tears of the Kingdom, the 3 dragons show up again. There are actually 5 by the end of the game. One being the light dragon, one the electric, the fire, the ice, and the demon dragon. Each of these 5 dragons ends up being an immortal dragon. 3 of them were tied to potentially the 3 goddesses of creation. Nehru, Ferrore, and Din. But in the case of the light and demon dragons, we know one of them was, spoilers to anybody who's not interested for the next 30 seconds-ish, One was Zelda, one was Ganondorf. We know this. At this point in time, I think that's a pretty open knowledge piece. But the thing is that 2 of the 5 dragons are released by the end of the game. The 3 end up being still lost. And it's a very interesting statement that's made by the sibling of Roru, Minoru, that effectively to become an immortal dragon is to let go of one's sense of self. You completely lose all sense of purpose, of who you once were and what your goals are by becoming a dragon. In the case of Zelda, this was a blessing in disguise because it meant that she could effectively exist for, in this case, a millennia above the skies of Hyrule, waiting for when Link would show up. But otherwise, the dragons themselves don't really have a sense of drive, a sense of purpose. They just kind of exist. They float around and are near aimless in their pursuit of something. We never really get the idea of what it is they're after, what it is they aim for. And so it leaves the dragons to be a little bit underwhelming as far as beings in the Zelda universe are concerned. You have some, like King Jabu Jabu, whose entire purpose is to protect the primary water source of all of Hyrule. You have some, or sorry, not King, Lord Jabu Jabu. There's a difference. But Jabu Jabu was there to try and protect the water sources. You had the Gorons, who were overseers of the mountains. You had the Gerudo, who effectively controlled the wastelands to the north. And if you look at future games, Twilight Princess had the Gerudo prison grounds act as a home or holder for the Mirror of Twilight. You have all sorts of moments throughout Zelda history where they effectively take something that is notable about each race and gives them something to either guard, protect, or be involved with in some way. In the case of Dinral controls the north end of Hyrule. He protects the lava and the volcano and protects the denizens surrounding it, as well as follows a path from the north end until what would be the west end, I think, of Hyrule, back in the Tabantha region. Ferore, or Farosh, controls the west end, but also the south end of Hyrule, patrolling the Faron Woods, as well as the Gerudo Highlands. And so you've got this entity controlling what would be a larger, more varied space across all of Hyrule. And then you have Naydra, who patrols the mountainous region just outside of Lanayru. Doesn't go any further north to reach the Zora's Domain. Doesn't go any farther south to reach the southern tip of the land. And with that, we finally hit the 4th weak point. That took way longer than I was hoping for, but I digress. I would rather do it right than do it wrong. And so, with that, Naydra will take a perch atop Mount Lanayru. Now, paraphrasing what is said here, effectively, Naydra has been freed from the clutches of malice. And now, it can resume its guardianship over this land, but must first be loosed with an arrow in ceremony, allowing it to go back about its duty of protecting Hyrule as a whole. Now, this was another moment of, I don't know if this is going to work. It says use an arrow. And generally when something says use an arrow, it generally doesn't work out well for me. I can usually botch something with a bomb or two, but arrows end up being the biggest situation that I can't really get around. Anywho, with that, Naydra has dropped a scale, and with that, we have once again gained access to the shrine behind the Spring of Wisdom. Hallelujah. And we're just gonna drop it in here, like so. And would you look at that? Everything lights up, we're all good to go, and off we go to the races. Anywho, with all that being said, if you think that this was way too much work, welcome to my life. If you think that that was something that should have been edited down, let me know a little bit. I am not afraid of doing things the hard way, and I think that's something that needs to be I'm aware of. If you have any other comments, questions, concerns, drop them down below. Any likes or subscribes would be greatly appreciated. Until next time, I hope you all have a fantastic week, and we'll see you next time.